So if it's your first time here, kindly show me some love. So look, I am one of those people who is against this idea of the main reason that Africans are suffering is because of the colonial influence in Africa. You know what? The colonialists have been in Africa 60 years ago. They were here 60 years ago. So you can imagine 60 years ago up to today, most of Africans are complaining that it's because of the colonial influence in Africa that Africa is not seeing development. Okay? So in this video, we are going to look at what PLO Lumumba is talking about in relation to that subject and what we as Africans have to do to make sure that we are from that state of poverty. Now, let's have a look at this. Then when we come back, we can analyze the video further.
I am one of the few who actually say that this idea that our problems we put at the feet of the colonizers is misguided. It is true that the former colonizers continue to, in a subterranean way, control affairs. But we have had our elites, thieves. We have had African leaders who have been kleptocrats. People like Mobutu Sese Seko stole money from their countries and destroyed their countries. We have had individuals such as Jean Bedel Bokassa in Central African Republic. We have had individuals such as Idi Amin of Uganda. We have had individuals such as Sani Abacha. And we have a political class in most African countries whose greatest claim to fame is that they are thieves and murderers. And for that reason, the time has come that blame must be apportioned and apportioned well. And if I was asked in many African countries, if I was to apportion blame, I would say that 60% of mess in Africa is occasioned by the so-called African leaders. And even the population is complicit. The voters themselves, when they are called upon to elect individuals into public office, they allow themselves to be bribed. They allow themselves to be mobilized on the basis of their ethnic background, and then they look for the former colonizers to blame. The former colonizers simply find a soft ground, and who are they not to exploit it? They exploit it, but if you are organized, then they will know that you are organized, and there are few African countries which are organized. Look at Mauritius. Look at what is happening in Mauritius. They are strong, they know what they do, they want, they define what they want, and therefore the world deals with them on their terms and in a manner that is mutually beneficial.
Now, part of the African problem is we don't define our interests. We don't define what we want. Okay? Now, if you've read about the history of Africa, I think you've read about what we call the Lagos Plan of Action. And you've read about the Abuja Plan of Action, Abuja Declaration, if I'm not wrong, that we as Africans were to integrate and open borders way back in the 1991 up to today, 2026, more than 30 years ago. That declaration is null and void. It has never been implemented. So part of the African problem is we normally talk on paper, but we don't implement what we are saying. So there's no need of us Africans blaming the West. There's no need of us blaming the West. Because even we as the electorate, we normally elect people who are not suitable to fit in public offices. So it is so unfortunate that in Africa, for you to be elected as a leader, it only depends on how much you have, okay? The amount of money you have. So that is part of African problem, that the electorate are not so much smart to elect people who love their countries into the public offices. Now, take a look at, for example, the president of Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni. President Museveni has done 2 books, if I'm not wrong, or maybe 3, but I've read 2 of his books. One of the books that he has done is called The Mustard Seed, and another book that he has done is called The Problem with Africa. And there's one thing that is highlighting in that book, that the problem with Africa is simply and squarely that of leadership. Same to Chinua Achebe, who wrote, I think way back, okay, that the problem of Africa is simply and squarely the problem of leadership, okay? Now imagine this president of Uganda, President Museveni, again in his book, he highlights that one of the reasons that why Africa is not progressing is because African leaders, they are into what we call trappings of power. That they are into trappings of power. This means that when you elect them into power, they get used to the lavish things that power has to offer, to the extent they don't want to leave office to others. Now, he highlighted that in his book, that is part of African problems. Now, President Museveni, the same person who was lamenting and who was blaming the government of the day, he has been in power for more than 35 years, if my memory serves me right. So, do we need to blame the colonial masters? No, we don't. We have to blame ourselves. We have to blame ourselves. Now, even though we are blaming ourselves, there are also some steps that we as Africans are making. But majority of African leaders, they are into power because of their own interests. Look at the western part of Africa. A president like President Paul Biya, he's very sick, more than 90 years old. Okay? More than 90 years old. If I'm not wrong, President Biya is in France receiving treatment as we're speaking now. Who is running Cameroon? The French government. They are the ones who are running Cameroon. When other African countries, they are doing away with the colonial masters. For example, if you go to Burkina Faso or the Sahel region, they chased the colonial masters away. They chased the French troops away from their countries. Yet other African countries, they are welcoming the French troops. For example, Kenya. Kenya recently has welcomed the French troops, and they were doing military drills in Kenya. Can you even believe that? When African countries are trying to move forward, we have those other countries that are trying to pull them back. Something that we as Africans have to stop and have to speak about this, because we love this continent and we want to catapult this continent to another level as far as development is concerned. Okay? Yeah, we are making baby steps. Look at the Sahel region. I like using the Sahel region as an example. Look at what President Traore is doing. Look at what Assimi Goïta is doing in Burkina Faso, in Mali. They are doing tremendous job. These are people who love Africa. They are passionate about their countries, and they want to see the general population catapulted to another level in matters development and economy. Okay? So we don't need to blame the colonial masters. Our problems are orchestrated by the people who we elect into power. It is as simple as that. It is as simple as that. And believe you me, if you are a colonial master, you know what you want. You have your interests that you want to achieve. So in one way or another, even if they are coming to the continent, for example, to grab resources, they know what they want. That's why they are coming for it. They know what they want. If you have a target, you want to achieve something, you have to achieve it. They have their target, they want to achieve something, and they are coming for their target. Okay? So we don't need to blame, oh, it's because of the French that we are poor, or it's because of the British that we are poor. These people, most of them, they left Africa 60 years ago. And we are still just talking about the colonial issues, instead of thinking about development. That is not the way to go. That is not the way to go. Because if you go to African countries, most of them, ask them, what is like your 10-year plan in this country? Most of the populations, even the leaders, they cannot tell you because they are just living today. And that is what is killing Africa. That is what is killing Africa. Look at the Communist Party in China. The other day I had a time, and I just wanted to watch what they normally discuss when they are meeting. The Chinese are discussing on how to deal with the world 100 years from 2026. Tell me, 100 years from 2026, who will be alive? None. But they are seeing far. That is why China is developing, unlike Africa. Okay? So we don't need to blame the colonial masters. We just have to elect the right people in power, and these people must have the passion to lead the general population. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. But that being said, we have a group of African leaders that are doing marvelous job. If you go to Rwanda, they are doing good. Go to Burkina Faso, go to Mali. They are trying to at least make sure that their country is going forward in matters development. So thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.